When the lonely receptionist meets the CEO, her life changes at midnight. Will she believe in love? The clock struck midnight, echoing eerily through the vast, empty office. A dim glow flickered from a lone desk lamp, casting elongated shadows that danced across the walls. Rachel, the office receptionist, sat slumped in her chair, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound breaking the suffocating silence. She looked around, her heart racing, every tick of the clock tightening the coil of anxiety in her chest. This wasn't just any night, it felt different, thick with secrets, electric with possibility. The flicker of the lamp stuttered ominously as Rachel noticed a figure emerging from the elevator, tall and imposing. She held her breath as a rush surged through her veins. It was David, the elusive CEO. The man who had an aura of mystery wrapped around him like a shadow. He was said to be brilliant and ruthless, known for his captivating charisma that left women weak in the knees. This was the first time she had laid eyes on him. Her coworkers often spoke of his eyes, intense and piercing, capable of seeing right through you. And tonight, in this uncanny stillness, he was walking straight toward her. "What are you doing here at this hour?" he asked, his voice deep and rough like gravel. It sent shivers down her spine. His presence seemed to swallow the entire room, making the air thicker, almost suffocating. Just a glimpse of him stirred an unfamiliar mixture of fear and thrill deep in her gut. Just then, the lights flickered again. A strange sound reverberated through the office, a low, haunting whisper, as if the building itself was telling secrets. Her palms started sweating. Had David heard it too? She glanced nervously toward the glass doors, half expecting someone to burst in from the darkness outside. Heat rushed to her cheeks, but she couldn't look away from him. Was this the moment everything would change? Before she could gather her thoughts, he stood closer, their eyes locking. The weight of the moment thickened. She noticed the way his jaw clenched, the way tension danced in the lines of his forehead. Just then, desperation twisted in her gut. Would she let fear rule this moment, or could she break free from her shy shell? "Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect." As he leaned in closer, the air crackled between them. What was he about to say? Just then, the lights went out completely, plunging them into darkness. A cold wave of fear washed over Rachel, her breath hitching in her throat. The world outside vanished, the city beyond the glass ceased to exist. It felt like they were the only two souls left in a void. Rachel's heart pounded like a drum, each beat echoing in her ears. Would he unravel the threads of her life with those words? Would she find the courage to leap into the unknown, a leap that could either be love or disaster? The silence screamed for answers, leaving her teetering on the edge of a precipice. Just what could happen now when the clock struck a different hour, a mysterious hour? Rachel's breath quickened in the enveloping darkness. The air felt charged, thick with unspoken tension. She could sense David's presence, even without the light. A shiver ran down her spine, ignited by the raw energy that crackled between them. Her heart raced, trapped between the fear of a darkness she couldn't see and the thrill of the unknown that lay just beyond it. Rachel, his voice, low and smooth, wrapped around her like a whispering secret. "Are you okay?" "Why yeah," she stammered, the sound of her own voice surprising her. Just a moment ago, she had been drowning in silence. Now she was hyper-aware of every little noise, the subtle creak of the building, the distant echo of her heartbeat, the quickening pace of her pulse in her ears. "Stay still," he instructed, a hint of urgency lacing his tone. She could barely nod, the weight of his command filled her with a strange exhilaration. Was it the darkness playing tricks on her mind, or was there something deeper at play? Suddenly, A low whir interrupted the stillness, followed by the faint hum of emergency lights flickering back to life. Reddish beams illuminated the office, casting eerie shadows and pulsing reflections. In that crimson glow, David seemed almost unreal, every line of his face sharper, every inch of his posture rigid and assertive. "What is happening?" Rachel's voice trembled as she ventured a question that lingered uncomfortably in the air. "There's a power outage. I should have made sure that backup generators were ready," he muttered, running a hand through his hair in action that exuded a mix of frustration and vulnerability. As he stepped back, Rachel felt the distance stretching between them, a physical gap that mirrored her emotional turmoil. How was it that she had felt so close, yet now everything felt impossibly far away? In that moment, the fluorescent lights flickered on and off erratically before surrendering completely once again. With the last feeble glimmer, Rachel caught the intensity in David's eyes. There was something fierce and protective igniting behind them. "You need to stay close," he said, his voice urgent. "I don't trust the building in situations like this." His proximity ignited her senses. Staring into those stormy depths, she realized that this was more than a chance encounter. This was a moment that would define them. But what did she know about the man before her? Just a shadow of a reputation cloaked in whispers, his charisma cloaked in obscurity. Suddenly, another sound broke through the tense atmosphere, a frantic pounding against the glass doors. Both of them turned, eyes wide. The rhythm quickened, a desperate plea for entry. "David," Rachel whispered, her throat dry, "what if it's someone or something? Stay behind me." His voice shifted, deepening into an authoritative growl. The heartbeat of the room dimmed, replaced by the frantic knocking. Each sound sending a fission of dread coursing through her veins. What lay outside the sanctuary of their office? What did they face? The shadows receded and a new fear clawed at her heart, a fear not just of the unknown but of the unknown in each other. "Whatever happens, don't move," David instructed, shifting into a protective stance. Rachel felt a rush of adrenaline. Would she even have the will to stay put? As the pounding grew louder, she realized something clicked into place. This night could unravel the fabric of her life or weave something new from the frayed threads. Before she could process the surge of mixed emotions, the doors burst open and a figure stepped inside, silhouetted against the emergency lights. Rachel held her breath, heart racing as the world teetered on the edge of chaos. Was this the moment everything would change, or the beginning of an even darker descent? Who or what had crossed the threshold into their fragile sanctuary? The figure paused just inside the doorway, enveloped in shadow. Rachel squinted, as if trying to make sense of the interloper. The panic surged, twisting her insides. She could barely breathe. "Who are you?" David's voice boomed, reverberating off the walls, mixing authority with an undercurrent of fear. The intruder remained silent, still as a statue, and Rachel caught a glimpse of deliberate movements, a hand reaching towards the light switch. "Don't!" she gasped, clutching David's arm tighter. The air shifted, thickening with unspoken intentions, as the ambient noise swallowed their breaths. Just a second, the stranger's voice was soft, almost angelic, cutting through the tension. They flicked a switch, casting the room into a dim glow. A frail figure appeared, a woman with wild, untamed hair and eyes wide with terror. "Help me please," she stuttered, her once composed demeanor now unraveling at the edges. David relaxed his stance, but Rachel remained on edge. "What are you running from?" he demanded, his voice even but edged with suspicion. "The others, they're not what they seem." Her words stumbled out like broken glass. "Please, you have to believe me." An unsettling silence engulfed the room, and Rachel thought she saw shadows flickering around the edges of the woman, as if the very walls were listening. "What do you mean? Who are you talking about?" Rachel pressed, the tension electrifying the air. "They're coming," the woman whispered, darting her gaze back toward the darkness outside, her eyes frantically seeking reassurance. "They've taken over the building. You need to leave, now." An icy wave washed over Rachel. The hours spent huddled in the office felt like a lifetime, and now the gravity of her surroundings pressed heavily upon her. "Who's coming?" she managed to ask, voice trembling. They know I tried to escape." "You can't trust anyone." Her desperation seeped into Rachel's heart, igniting a firestorm of chaos in her chest. David stepped closer, positioning himself between Rachel and the stranger, protective instincts flaring. "What do you know about this place?" he demanded, eyes locked onto her. "Everything," the woman said, her tone shifting from pleading to fierce. "This isn't just an office building. It's a trap, a network of lies. They've been watching, waiting." The lights flickered again, casting ghastly shadows as the heartbeat of the room shifted yet again. Rachel felt a chill run through her as reality twisted like a coiling serpent around her. What hidden secrets marched through the halls she had never noticed? "Who is they?" Rachel asked, unable to contain her rising fear. They're connected to the company. They're using it for something terrible." She looked around, eyes wide. "You have to trust me, we're all in danger." Before Rachel could even respond, the emergency lights flickered back, plunging the room into darkness once more. The air turned electric, and a strange sound echoed through the building, a low, mechanical growl. David cursed under his breath as the tension thickened. "Get back," he said, grabbing Rachel's arm, pulling her closer. The shadows seemed to gather, cradling their fears, pushing against the boundaries of the room. "What do we do?" Rachel's voice barely rose above a whisper, but she felt the urgency booming in her chest. Was this woman a savior or a siren, leading them deeper into a maze of destruction? "I don't know," David admitted, his eyes scanning the dark, searching. "But we can't stay here. We need to figure out what's really going on. We can't trust her off the bat, Rachel." "Please," the woman whispered, her voice trembling as much as Rachel's heart. Just as Rachel opened her mouth to respond, the creature's growl rose above the din, an unnatural sound, jagged and terrifying. A sudden crash echoed from the corridor outside, shaking the ground beneath them. "Run!" David shouted, adrenaline surging through him. Before they could react, the doors slammed shut, locking them inside. The shadows roared around them, blending with their fear, as reality splintered, taking them deeper into the dark. Rachel's heart raced, mind racing with questions as they were cocooned in a blend of dread and anticipation. What awaited them on the other side of this chaos? Would their lives ever return to normal, or had they crossed a line from which there was no turning back? The darkness swallowed them whole, a shroud that felt almost alive. Rachel clutched David's arm, her nails digging in as they stood frozen. The faint whir of machinery echoed in the distance, punctuated by another growl that seemed to vibrate through their bones. "Why is it locked?" Rachel whispered, panic creeping into her voice. The woman's trembling form barely illuminated by the emergency lights flickered with her unstable presence. "Because they know," the woman said, her tone urgent but laced with despair. "They don't want anyone to leave." David's muscles coiled, ready to spring. "We need to find another exit. Now," he said, steeling himself. "No. There's no way out," the woman implored, her voice cracking. "Trust me, just listen. There are hidden passages, but we must be quick. They're searching the building." Searching, the word pierced Rachel's mind like a shard of ice. Who were these they? Could they really be lurking just outside? She exchanged a glance with David, anxiety flashing through him. "Why were you running? What did you see?" David pressed, determination pushing through his fear. The woman hesitated, glancing back toward the darkness as if expecting something to appear. "I saw the truth," she whispered sharply. "I overheard them talking, soldiers in suits, planning something wicked. They're creating an army." "An army?" The word echoed in Rachel's mind, swelling her panic to new heights. "What do you mean?" Rachel's voice trembled, needing clarity amidst the chaos. "They're using us like guinea pigs. The desperation in her tone clawed Rachel's heart. Testing us, monitoring us, pretending to be colleagues. Just then, the walls seemed to pulse, amplifying the tension, as shadows whispered and flickered around them. Rachel shivered. Was there any way to trust this woman? What if this were just a ruse? Enough. David's voice shattered the suffocating air. We either believe her, or we'll end up as part of whatever they're planning. It's just us three against the darkness. The woman nodded, eyes glimmering with fervor. Follow me. I know a way. Before Rachel could ponder the risks, David gripped her hand tightly, guiding her towards the back of the room where a faint glint of light caught her eye. But just as they pushed deeper, the monstrous growl erupted again, followed by harsh pounding footsteps reverberating closer. Go. David commanded, nearly dragging them both along. The woman darted ahead, leading through a narrow corridor engulfed in shadow. Rachel felt her heart racing faster than her feet could keep up, panic making her breath shallow. They turned sharply into another dimly lit space that smelled of dampness and rust. The sounds behind them grew louder, almost rhythmic like the ticking of a clock, counting down to some horrific conclusion. Open that door. Rachel yelled, pointing at a weathered wooden door at the end of the passage. The woman rushed to it, hands shaking as she twisted the handle. It wouldn't budge. Come on. She hissed, pounding on the door. Behind them, the growling sound transformed into an inhuman snarl, echoing through the corridor, sending a jolt through Rachel as she felt the pits of despair deepening. That in a last-ditch effort, David threw himself against the door, his shoulder slamming into it with a force that reverberated back at them. The door cracked open, just a sliver, revealing a faint glimmer that drew them in. Now! He shouted, pulling Rachel inside just as the shadows behind rushed forward. They stumbled into the room, and the door slammed shut behind them with a deafening thud. Inside, breathless and panicked, they barely had time to gather their wits. The space was lined with flickering monitors, revealing scenes from every corner of the building. Rachel's stomach dropped as she realized they were being watched, every move calculated, every decision a test. Look! The woman gasped, pointing to the screens. They're tracking us. We need to find the mainframe, shut down their abilities to watch us. David clenched his fists, resolve hardening his features. Then we find it fast. But we're going to need a miracle. Rachel wasn't sure she even believed in miracles anymore, but as the lights flickered once more, revealing something shifting in the shadows, she knew they were out of time. In that moment, with dread crawling up her spine, she faced the reality that they were far from alone and the horrors of what lay ahead were just beginning. What awaited them in the sprawling depths of the building? What would they discover about the truth that bound their fates together in darkness? The monitors flashed wildly, images distorting in and out like broken memories. There was no time. David's anger burned brighter than his fear. We can't just stand here, he yelled, darting towards a panel covered in flickering lights. What do we need to do? Is there a keyboard? The woman nodded, moving quickly to the far wall. Over there. It's risky, but we can disable their surveillance at least for a moment. But we have to move. Rachel felt the weight of the atmosphere press down on her. Shadows crept at the edges of her vision, reminding her of something lurking just out of sight. Her heart raced while they gathered around the glowing terminal. With a shaking hand, the woman began typing furiously. The strange clicks of the keys seemed out of place in a world filled with monstrous growls and uncertainty. Come on, come on. She whispered, anxiety dripping from every word. The screens displayed chaotic scenes. Groups of people filed in, all clad in similar dark suits, whispering and pointing. Were they all in on this? The realization clawed at Rachel's mind, each breath feeling more suffocating. Fear nestled deep in her soul. Do you think they're looking for us? Rachel asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Most definitely, David said, eyes darting around the room, scanning for any signs of the impending attack. We need to hurry. If they find out we're here, if they find out we've seen." His voice trailed off, swallowed by the anxiety thickening in the air. Suddenly, a series of loud bangs resonated against the door behind them, rattling the metal frame. David's eyes widened, and he stepped back instinctively, positioning himself protectively in front of Rachel and the woman. "They're coming," he declared, grim determination filling his features. The woman let out a breathless gasp, her fingers hesitating on the keyboard. "I almost have it. Just a few more seconds." Time felt fluid, slipping like sand through Rachel's fingers. The pounding intensified, fury mixed with desperation, as they thudded against the door, sending jolts through her body. "How long?" David shouted. "Just a few more seconds." The woman's voice was a trembling string, fraying under pressure. Rachel felt paralyzed by the noise. Every thud echoed like a countdown, raising her heartbeat to a frantic rhythm. "Think. What will they do if they get in?" The question tumbled from her lips, heavy with fear. "Worse than anything we can imagine," David replied, eyes locked on the door. Moments melted away, and with each agonizing second, the pounding grew nearer, closer. She could almost feel the cold breath of something on the other side, waiting to slither in. "Got it!" the woman shouted, launching herself backwards just as a blinding white light erupted from the monitors. The buzzing sound intensified, drowning out the pounding for just an instant. "What did you do?" David snapped, his voice a mix of urgency and fear. "I started the override. It should scramble their surveillance for a few minutes." She was gasping, her body trembling. But it won't stop them forever. "We must move now." As if summoned by her words, the door buckled, splintering violently as a powerful force slammed against it. A crack formed, just wide enough to reveal a glimpse of the darkened corridor beyond. "Run!" Rachel cried, adrenaline surging in her veins. They lunged forward just as the door exploded inward, shadows pouring into the room like oil spilling on canvas, dark and consuming. David reached out for Rachel, their hands gripping tightly as they tore through the doorway, diving headfirst into the impenetrable darkness of the corridor. Behind them, chaos erupted anew, and Rachel felt terror wrapped tightly around her. Together, they sprinted down the winding halls, each step echoing off the walls like a countdown to a reckoning. She could hear their pursuers, voices amplified in anger, pounding feet chasing after them until it felt as if the very building itself was alive and hunting. "Left!" David yelled, forcing her to veer off as they raced down a narrow passage. "Where are we going?" Rachel gasped, but even in her fear, there was a glimmer of reliance on David. "To safety," he shouted back. "I hope." But safety was a fleeting concept this deep in the heart of darkness. Instead, ahead, something glimmered, something that didn't belong in the shadowy labyrinth they traversed. A faint light, like hope towards which they were inexorably drawn. As they approached, hoping for an escape, thoughts of what would happen if they were caught coursed through Rachel's mind. Would they become part of whatever twisted experiment that awaited them? "If we can get to that light," David began, then cut off as the shadows behind them screamed, tearing through the darkness. What would they discover at the end of this corridor? And were they running toward freedom or deeper into the abyss? They pushed on, racing toward that skinny beam of light. Rachel felt her lungs burning, the air sharp and cold against her throat. With every step, dread gripped her insides, squeezing harder as the echoes of their pursuers grew louder. "What if it's a trap?" Rachel gasped, looking at David, her voice trembling. David shook his head, determination etched on his face. "We don't have time to think about that. It's either this or getting caught. Please, just urge your feet to keep moving." The darkness that swirled behind them roared, a chilling reminder of what they were running from. They rounded a corner, barreling toward the light. It flickered like a beacon, pulsing steadily in the chaos, a promise of safety or perhaps an illusion. But Rachel's heart raced with a mix of hope and fear. What if safety was just another chain wrapped tighter around them? Suddenly, the corridor opened into a larger chamber, flooded with pale light that cast eerie shadows across the walls. Rachel skidded to a stop, her pulse pounding in her ears. The room was a nightmarish expanse filled with mismatched equipment and faded posters. A tangle of wires snaked through the space, forming a chaotic web. "Where are we?" Rachel asked, scanning the area. It felt like a forgotten world, an abandoned theater of horrors. David squinted at a console jutting from the side of the room. I think this is their control center. If we can get to that terminal, maybe we can find out what they want. But what if someone catches us?" Rachel felt like she was walking the edge of a knife, her chest tight with the dread of the unknown. "We'll never know unless we try." Before she could respond, a loud crash reverberated from the corridor they had just come from, sending a fresh wave of panic through her. Shadows gathered, swirling with ominous intent. "Now!" David shouted, even as Rachel felt the ground shift underfoot. They dashed toward the terminal, heartbeats synchronized with each step. The woman who had helped them was there, staring wide-eyed, either with fear or resolve. Rachel couldn't tell. "Quick! I need the manual override codes," she said breathlessly, her fingers poised above a jumble of buttons. "If I can access their mainframe, we can disrupt their operation." "What about?" Rachel started, but another crash cut her off, closer this time. The shadows were closing in. "Shut up and help!" David cried, his eyes wild with urgency, half glancing back toward the corridor. Rachel nodded, taken by a sudden surge of adrenaline and fear. She ran over to help the woman, trying to keep everything focused, her mind racing for answers they didn't have the luxury of time to find. They needed the codes fast. A few moments later, David shouted, "Hurry! We need to go before they." The ground shook violently, as if the building itself was being torn apart. Something monstrous was coming. The lights above flickered ominously, plunging them into near darkness for a heart-stopping moment. And then, there it was, a monstrous silhouette looming in the entrance, like a nightmare made flesh. Its presence sucked the very breath from the air, a dark figure amplified by the abhorrent sounds behind it. "Get the codes! Now!" David yelled, rushing to cover their escape. Rachel saw the fear in his eyes, igniting a fire within her. She was ready to fight to survive. The woman beside her was still tapping furiously at the terminal, desperation fueling her actions. "I need another minute," the woman cried, glancing nervously at the gaping shadows. "Make it faster," Rachel shouted, knowing time was a fragile thread ready to snap. The walls trembled as the shadow roared again, the sound reverberating throughout the chamber. It was a sound of hunger, an echo of their doom. Every fiber of Rachel's being screamed for them to flee, but here they stood, battling against an unseen force. Would they extract the codes in time? Was their struggle in vain? As the monstrous figure advanced, its intent clear, Rachel felt the ground beneath her shift once more, tilting toward an uncertain ending. "Just a little longer," the woman pleaded. Fingers flying over the keys. And then, a blinding flash erupted. What had shifted in the balance? Would it bring salvation or annihilation? Before Rachel could find out, darkness enveloped her world. Light pierced through the darkness, sharp and brilliant, a stunning contrast to the weight that pressed against Rachel's chest moments before. She gasped, her eyes blinking rapidly as they adjusted to the sudden brightness. "Rachel!" David's voice broke through the haze, raw with urgency. She turned to see him, knelt beside her, his expression a wild mix of relief and fear. He was still in the control center, but the horrifying silhouette had vanished. "What happened?" Rachel questioned, her voice hoarse, eyes darting around. The woman who had been at the terminal was now slumped against it, panting heavily. I think I did it," she wheezed, her face pale but triumphant. "The codes, I overrode their system. We bought ourselves a few minutes." Rachel felt a surge of hope ripple through her, quickly snuffed out by a nagging doubt. A few minutes? What does that even mean? But David was already scanning the chamber, every instinct screaming that they needed to keep moving. "It means we need to find a way out now." As they stumbled towards the exit, a pervasive silence surrounded them, unnatural, unsettling. The echoes of their footsteps bounced off the walls, amplifying the sense that they were not alone. The flickering lights warped the shadows into grotesque forms, creeping closer as if they had a mind of their own. "Do you hear that?" David whispered, his face grave. Rachel strained her ears, and beneath the heavy silence, she could hear something faint like distant machinery whirring to life, punctuated by mechanical clanks that sent chills racing down her spine. "Quick!" Rachel urged, pushing ahead. "We should go before they realize what we've done." They dashed through the archway, out of the control center, but the corridor seemed to stretch endlessly. No light, just darkness swallowing every ounce of hope. Rachel's heart raced as dread filled her stomach. The stillness was menacing. "Wait." David summoned a breath. "We need a plan. We can't just run into." Before he could finish, the ground shook beneath them like a beast awakening. Light flickered, and a heavy door slammed shut behind them with a thunderous crash. They were trapped. "Great. Just great," Rachel muttered, panic surging. "What do we do now?" "Stay calm." David moved closer, looking around for any possible escape route. "There has to be something." Rachel's mind raced. "What if we went back? We could know." He turned to her sharply, urgency blending with fear. "That's where they will be looking for us. We need to find another path." Suddenly, a sound pierced through the air, a low hum that resonated with unease. She watched as David stiffened, his face paling. "What is that?" Rachel asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know, but it's getting closer," he replied, eyes wide with horror. The humming intensified, merging with an eerie melody that twisted into a grotesque wave. Rachel felt as if the walls themselves were pulsing, vibrating dangerously with the rhythm. An overwhelming urge to flee consumed her, but there were no safe places left. A glint of metal caught her eye, a small panel embedded into the wall, partly ajar. "Over there!" she shouted, pointing. "What if it's a passage?" As they sprinted towards it, the sound changed. The eerie melody morphed into a deafening roar, an angry storm rumbling just beyond the walls. Rachel's heart accelerated. If they didn't hurry, they might not escape at all. David glanced back, eyes wide with realization. "We're running out of time." They dove into the panel, Rachel squeezing her way in just before a terrifying shadow loomed over the opening. Cold air rushed past her face as they scrambled through, adrenaline surging. The hallway seemed to elongate indefinitely, the sounds of the creature trailing behind them. "Go. Don't stop," David urged, pushing her forward, his breath hot against her neck. But that's when the rumbling intensified, walls constricting around them as if the very structure of the building was tearing itself apart. "Is this the end?" Rachel screamed, desperation clawing at her throat as darkness held them tightly once more, but just ahead, a flicker of light emerged. Was it a way out or another trap? As she raced toward the glow, the question hung in the air: what awaited them on the other side? The darkness beckoned, and Rachel could almost hear its whispers, promising answers she feared to uncover. The flicker of light grew stronger as Rachel dashed forward, her pulse hammering in her ears. David followed closely, his determination radiating through the cramped space. The light cast a surreal glow, illuminating the outlines of twisted metal and concrete walls. Rachel felt as if the shadows were clutching at her ankles, pulling her back into the suffocating dark. "Keep moving." David's voice cut through the tension, pushing her onward. With each desperate step, Rachel tasted the metallic tang of fear. "What if it's a dead end?" she whispered, glancing nervously behind as ominous sounds echoed, a cruel symphony of grinding metal and distant hisses. "It can't be worse than what's behind us," David replied, his tone a mix of defiance and terror. Each rhythmic thud of their shoes against the cold floor was a countdown to whatever horror chased them. The light grew brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat. Just then, they burst through to a wider chamber, and the sight before them drew a sharp breath from Rachel's lungs. A massive control panel loomed in the center, screens swirling with flickering data streams and graphs. This was no ordinary room, it felt like the heart of a beast, alive and thrumming with power. Wow! David's voice trailed off as he approached the panel, bathed in the glow of the monitors. This could be what we need to shut them down for good. A part of Rachel was tempted to join him, to feel that flicker of hope. But another, more primal instinct, urged her to stay alert. David, focus. We can't get distracted. A low growl resonated from the darkness behind them, the sound shifting her adrenaline into overdrive. Right, he snapped back to reality, fingers hovering over the controls. I think I can, but before he could finish, the door they had entered through rattled fiercely. The shadows morphed, deepening like a storm cloud ready to unleash its fury. Move! Rachel shouted, turning to scan for any means of escape, when she noticed a small doorway to the left, barely visible under the glare of the screens. There. We can get through there. They scrambled towards the door, hearts beating wildly, but just as they reached it, a monstrous silhouette emerged from the shadows behind them. The sound of its screeching sent a jolt through her. It was more than just a creature, it felt like a culmination of their fears, an embodiment of everything dark and oppressive. Hold the door! David yelled, forcing it open. Rachel shoved herself through first, adrenaline surging as she dove into the unknown, too close. The creature's breath was hot against her back as she skidded into an even darker passage. David followed, slamming the door shut behind them with a resounding thud. Do you think it can get through? Rachel panted, pressing her ear against the cold metal. She could hear it thrashing outside, the creature roiling with rage. Not unless it can squeeze through tighter spaces. David looked around wildly. We have to find another way out of here. The walls were damp and echoing, full of secrets. This way, she urged, leading them down yet another narrow corridor. With each step, the air turned thicker. It was humid and smelled of decay, filling Rachel's lungs with dread. What kind of place is this? She said, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know, but we need to stick together. David's eyes darted back down the corridor, scanning for threats even in the dark. Suddenly, a hand reached out from the shadows, cold and clammy. It gripped Rachel's arm. She screamed, heart racing as she spun around to confront whatever lurked behind her. Rachel! David shouted, and she met his terrified gaze as she stumbled backward, unable to shake off the grip, but before she could scream again, a figure stepped into the weak light spilling from a shaft above. It was neither the creature chasing them nor something welcoming. It was human, disheveled, with haunted eyes that seemed to hold the weight of countless nightmares. It's here. It's all here, the figure murmured, a strange mixture of fear and resignation in their voice. Rachel's heart sank. What had they stumbled into now? Who are you? David demanded, stepping protectively in front of Rachel, ready to defend her from whatever threat lay ahead. Before the stranger could answer, a distant roar echoed through the corridor, shaking their very souls. The creature was onto them. Rachel's heart raced with the looming realization, they had a choice to make, to confront the unknown or flee down an even darker path ahead, and now, as the shadows closed in, the only question that remained was, would they find salvation or doom? Rachel's pulse thundered in her ears, drowning out everything but the primal instinct to survive. The figure looming before them, shrouded in shadows, was not the comfort they had hoped for. They could barely make out the man's features, but the depths of his fear were unmistakable. Who are you? David pressed again, more urgently this time. I'm one of the last. The stranger stammered, eyes darting nervously toward the corridor behind them. You need to listen. The creature doesn't just hunt. It knows its south part of this place. The word sent chills down Rachel's spine. This was a warning, a premonition wrapped in dread. What do you mean? What is this place? She whispered, but her voice trembled. An experiment gone wrong. His voice cracked, reverberating off the damp walls. They thought they were creating something brilliant. But it turned against us. It feeds on fear, on despair. It's turning us into shadows. Rachel couldn't absorb it. A monster that thrived on their fears. They didn't have time for this. A distant crash interrupted her thoughts, and the roar of the creature echoed once more, louder and angrier than before. It was getting closer. "Run!" David shouted, grabbing Rachel's arm and pulling her forward. The stranger hesitated, caught between fear and uncertainty. Rachel felt a surge of anger. How could he just stand there? "Come on!" she yelled. "We don't have time." In desperation, the stranger followed, sprinting just behind them as they plunged into the corridor. The walls seemed to lean in, whispering secrets of despair as they ran, the air thickening like molasses, choking them. They hurtled down bends and turns, the sound of their footsteps swallowed by the oppressive atmosphere. Rachel risked a glance back, watching the flicker of movement behind them, a dark mass that slithered and shifted like liquid night. "Here! This way!" David yelled, spotting an opening to the right. They all darted into a side passage, breathless with panic. Once inside, they skidded to a halt, gasping for air. The small alcove seemed like a temporary refuge, but Rachel's heart sank. The walls here were marked with something. She leaned in closer. Scratches, like claw marks, marred the surface. "What is happening?" David muttered, trying to catch his breath. The stranger curled into himself, staring at the markings with wide eyes. "They didn't survive," he whispered, voice hollow. "The others, they didn't know when to leave." Rachel felt cold sweat trickle down her back. How could they be sure they were destined for a different fate? The weight of the stranger's words pressed against them, a shroud of hopelessness wrapping tighter. "Stop it. We need to figure out how to get out," Rachel urged, shaking her head to clear the dark thoughts. "You said you knew things about this place. Tell us." But before he could respond, the ground quaked as if the entire structure wanted to swallow them whole. The roar they had heard earlier was now accompanied by a growl, a promise of the creature's wrath nearing. "Faster! This is all wrong." David's voice was fraying at the edges, fear creeping in. Suddenly, another loud crash came from the direction they had just fled. "It's coming! We have to go!" Rachel screamed, adrenaline surging through her. They barreled deeper into the maze of darkened corridors, plunging into an unknown that felt more like a trap than an escape. Each corner held the weight of uncertainty, and just when they thought they found a glimmer of hope, it would fade into despair. "Wait!" the stranger shouted, grabbing their shoulders. "There's a place we can hide, at least for now. But it's a risk." A flicker of doubt crossed Rachel's mind. What if it's another dead end? What if it gets us first? But the howl of the creature, now echoing behind them, left no time for deliberation. They had to trust. They had to believe that somewhere in this nightmare lay a path to salvation. They had to find it before the shadows consumed them. "Lead the way," David urged, his eyes wide with fear yet alight with a desperate spark of hope, and as they plunged deeper into the unknown, the walls began to whisper again, echoing questions of their true fate. Would they emerge from the darkness, or had they already sealed their doom? The darkness clung to them as they navigated the tangled passages, shadows whispering doubts and fears. The stranger led the way, heart pounding with the specter of the creature at their heels. Rachel's breath quickened. "I can't believe this is happening," she thought, clutching David's hand tighter, the warmth grounding her amidst the chaos. They turned a corner, and the stranger suddenly halted, pressing against a door that was so weathered it looked like it belonged to another time. "This is it," he whispered, casting a glance over his shoulder. "We have to be quick." David pushed Rachel forward as they careened into the small room behind the stranger. The door creaked ominously, but they yanked it shut just in time. In an instant, Rachel felt a wave of relief wash over her. But there was no time for victory. They huddled in the dim light, hearts hammering as the growls of the creature echoed just outside. "What do we do now?" Rachel breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. The stranger pressed his back against the door, fear stark in his eyes. We wait. It won't find us if we're quiet. But I promise we need to escape soon. It comes for those who express fear. David's jaw clenched. This is insane. We need to take action. He turned to Rachel, voice filled with urgency, we need a plan. We can't just sit here hoping it won't find us. The silence hung heavily, filled with palpable tension. Rachel's mind raced. She was scared, but she couldn't give in to despair. If it feeds on fear, then we can't show it that we're afraid. We need to act like we're in control. Whatever this place is, we can't let it take that from us. The stranger shifted, his voice quaking, that means we need to face it. I know there is a way out, but it's risky. Risky is better than waiting for it to come for us, Rachel said, stealing a glance at the trembling stranger. She needed to be strong, they all did. Okay, David nodded, determination flickering in his eyes. Show us the way. We're not turning back now. The stranger nodded, taking a deep breath. There's a maintenance shaft not far from here. It leads to the lower levels. From there, we can move freely. But I can't guarantee you safety once we go down. Let us get moving, David urged, exuding strength that pushed through Rachel's uncertainty. They pushed against the door, and Rachel took a deep breath. The quiet threatened to crush her. With a swift motion, the stranger unlatched it, and they stepped out into the swallowing darkness once again, their senses heightened. As they crept along the corridor, a sense of urgency propelled them forward. The walls felt alive, thrumming as if echoing the pulse of their fear. Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, intensifying with each step. Don't look back, David whispered, gripping her hand once more, anchoring her with silent strength. They reached a steel door with a flickering light above it. This is it. The stranger gasped, pushing it open. A narrow shaft, dark and iron, loomed before them like a gaping mouth. The air felt heavier as they stepped toward it. You first. I'll follow. David nodded and lowered himself into the guttering darkness, giving Rachel an encouraging nod. She followed closely, squeezing through the tight space, her heart pounding and terror clawing at her. As they descended deeper, the strange, mechanical noises grew louder, signals of the chaos brewing above. They maneuvered through the dark, the shafts seeming to stretch indefinitely. But there was no going back, only forward. Finally, they landed softly on the ground, blinking against the light that pierced through small vents. This way. The stranger urged, and they picked up speed, a sense of purpose igniting their flight. But just as they turned a corner, the floor trembled, a foreboding shake that halted their progress. The creature's growl resonated through the walls, a guttural reminder of their impending doom. Run! David shouted, pulling Rachel onward, and they dashed down the hall. The shadows stretched, twisted, and threatened to consume them once more. They pushed forward until they found an open room glowing with soft blue light. Monitors adorned the walls, but the screens flickered erratically, showing glimpses of what appeared to be the building's surroundings. What is this place? Rachel gasped, panic rushing in. The stranger scanned the screens, frustration marking his features. The control room. This is where they run their operations. We can disable everything from here. Then let us do it. David fired back, darting towards the terminals, but their moment of relief was short-lived. The growl escalated into a spine-chilling roar as the creature burst through the doorway. Rachel froze, fear coursing through her, paralyzed by the terror clawing at her. David grabbed her arm, pulling her back as the creature's shadow loomed ever closer. Get back! He shouted, shoving his body in front of hers just as the beast lunged. But in that instant, Rachel felt something snap inside her, a surge of adrenaline mixed with courage. She wouldn't let it take them. Go! She cried, pushing past David, determination inflating her chest as she raced towards the consoles, fingers flying over buttons, desperately trying to figure out how to take control of this nightmare. It was chaos. The growls echoed as the monitors blared. The creature was angry, furious at their defiance. But Rachel focused, pushing through the fear that wrapped around her. "I can do this," she declared, finding the override settings. "Rachel. We don't have time," David shouted. She could feel his fear radiating, but she shook her head. "Trust me." She saw a flashing button marked Emergency System Disable. All or nothing. With a swift motion, she pressed it, the lights flickered violently, and the sound of machinery whirring suddenly halted. For a breath, silence engulfed them, and then an overwhelming eruption of energy surged, cascading through the room like a wave of icy clarity. The monitors lit up, showing every angle of the building, every dark corner that housed the nightmare. And then she saw it, an escape route in full view, illuminated brightly. "Rachel!" David shouted, "We can get out." The creature screeched, caught in the turbulence of the systems crashing, its form faltering as lights cascaded like confetti, bringing the walls tumbling down around their dark secrets. The moment felt still, frozen in time. Rachel's heart raced faster than ever as clarity took hold. "Let us go," she commanded, racing toward the exit marked on screen as the room shook. "They can't look back, never again." They tore through the room as the screens fizzled and sparks erupted from the walls, pouring shadows helplessly back into the dark. The creature's howl fled behind them, fastened in the chaos as they reached the doorway leading back into the world. They burst through, fresh air rushing past them, the night surreal and alive. The city glimmered anew, bright and just barely tangible. "We did it!" Rachel gasped, hardly believing it as sheer exhilaration raced through her veins. But then, she turned to David, who was still gasping for breath, eyes wild with disbelief. "We're free," he whispered. Rachel nodded, tears stinging her eyes. They had faced the shadows together, survived, and in that moment, enveloped by relief and adrenaline, they knew they had emerged from darkness into something beautiful and new beginning. As they looked to the horizon, unsure of what lay ahead but bound together by the experience, Rachel felt warmth blossom in her chest. Love. Hope. It felt possible now. "Whatever comes next, we face it together," she said, smiling through the fear. David returned her gaze, his own emotion mirrored back, and they held on to each other tightly. This was their moment, a promise born of struggle, united against the darkness. Now, dear friends, this is a huge moment for you, too. If you love this thrilling conclusion, you need to subscribe now to ensure you don't miss the next exclusive stories that are waiting for you. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and keep this adventure alive. And flood the comments section with your reactions. I want to hear your theories about Rachel and David's journey and what you thought of this twist. Finally, don't wait even one more second, share this video with at least 5 friends who need this adrenaline rush. Your support is what keeps these stories coming, and we can't do it without you.